Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, the recap of Paris-Roubaix Femmes, avec, Zwift. I can't remember the fourth or fifth edition of this race. It's got its own race or day, which it deserves on the Saturday, and it's been a spectacle, some very exciting racing. We do have now TV coverage beginning from the very first cobble sector, which is good, a change from the first edition, and we catch all the action today on TV. Really exciting race from Denain to Roubaix, 150 k's long. First 65 k's of tarmac, good weather conditions, very dry in fact on the cobbles, some cross tailwind in sections, 17 cobble sections beginning with the Honnat of Vendigny, and then we go through the whole same final 17 as the men's race, including some of the favourites, Orchy-les-Orchy, where the race has opened up, Orchy and Orchy-les-Orchy in the last year with Kopecky. Some longer tarmac section between cobbles sectors 9 and 7, and then ones you'll be familiar with, of course, with Mons-en-Pavel, Canfin-en-Pavel, and Carrefour-de-l'Arbre, some of the 5-star sectors, and that's the last, the last things of the cobble sectors of note before the famous finish in the Velodrome. How you, Benji? How's your sickness?
I'm doing pretty good. I've resurrected for the Holy Week. It's almost like written in the Bible the way I resurrected myself. It is after being sick for
the preview. It is Easter
but
Sunday next weekend.
Is it next Sunday?
I believe so. But speaking of sickness and perhaps being resurrected, before the stage today, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot said she was a little bit crook. She was maybe thinking of not even participating in the race. She did crash heavily in Strade Bianche before, and so that was a blow in theory for Visma. They bring her and Voss as the two-headed spear of attack as well to battle the Kopecky and Weber's spear of attack at SD Worx.
Yeah, but we got to be honest. From the start of this race, we had on the lists, when it comes to the favorites for this race, SD Worx. Both Weber's and Kopecky. The perspective from the majority of the cycling world going into this race is it's going to be hard for SD Worx not to win this, or for another team to really find a way around that two-headed spear, because even outside of those, we have other riders that could do very well as well. But was it me who was slightly disappointed in maybe the team that was around Kopecky and Wiebes? Yes, Bosch is good, but Cecchini and Guarischi are not necessarily the riders I would put in there for Roubaix above the likes of a Gerrits and so forth, or Bredewold, or am I too much thinking about the hilly classics versus the flat classics?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's like with the men, the sprinters can survive really far because the speed is so high and their drafting is so good, and sometimes their handling, like a Merlier's an ex-cyclocross rider, him and Valscheid survive. But for the women, because the speed's a little bit lower on the cobble sector, it still is like a threshold. Like you still have to be the best rider to make the finish. And we saw Alison Jackson's win in previous years. That wasn't a fluke in that she makes Group 1 now every year in this race from the peloton. So you do have to have a really big threshold. And if you're like a pure sprinter like Cole, or a lead out like Guarischi or Riccioli Barbieri, actually you can't make as big a difference as someone like Jonas Rickard might tomorrow. So you're right, Benji. Still, Blanka Vaslach, that's solid. That's very, very solid. And Cecchini is a good rider too. So it's still the best team in the race. I mean, Trek they still have Balsam as a sprint option and Van Dijk as the attacker. So But yeah, Elisa Longo-Borghini was out, of course, with her injuries from the previous weekend's crash. And then who's in the break, Benji? Or any other news?
So, breakaway only 2 riders this time around. Quinty Ton from Jayco and Aurela Nedlo from the Windspace team. We saw in the breakaway of Omloop. She was the one fighting for the victory with Lotte Klaas, who did the 1 kilometer sprint. That was her, the Polish rider. She was in the breakaway today as well. But gotta say, the breakaway did not survive too long, because once it formed, a couple of 20, 30 kilometers until the cobble sectors start, maybe a bit longer. Cobble sectors do begin, and it doesn't take long before we see splintering in the peloton. We see groups falling off the back, which we always do early on in Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift, and then we go later over 1-2 cobble sectors, and we start seeing people rolling attacks a little bit, and Little Trek is one of the teams that does it quite early. And does it surprise you that Little Trek with Alan van Dijk here with 72 kilometers to go, so sector 15 roughly, at the end of that sector, goes for the attack, knowing that Balsamo maybe needs a bit of a lighter race?
No, it doesn't surprise me.
Okay.
Because they literally won this race with this tactic in the first edition on the first cobble sector. Controversial Lizzie Deignan went clear, and she was never caught. And that was, we just saw her when the coverage started, her riding solo the whole race. So they've done this before. Van Dijk's in great shape. Maybe you should use a Loretta Hansen or someone before Van Dijk. But it causes problems for a lot of other teams, Benji. It causes problems because it's SD Worx don't immediately solve it. Ferrand Prévot, you can see her thinking about it.
Yeah.
When Van Dijk jumped, she was caught in two minds. She jumped, didn't quite get across, pulled for a bit, was with Vash, didn't commit, and then Van Dijk's got 15 seconds.
Exactly, and you're right in the way that Ferrand Prévot doesn't immediately close it, which it's fine. I don't think she should be the one necessarily closing it instantly, but when it comes to SD Worx, it felt to me like they didn't have the riders there that they wanted to have there to close it to begin with, because once that Ellen Van Dijk split happened, we get into the next cobble sector and we see multiple groups from that quote-unquote favorites group, where Ellen Van Dijk catches the breakaway, the likes of Quinty Ton, Nedelo's now dropped at this point, getting caught by the group behind. That group behind, we're talking about maybe 13 riders for a second there. The Peloton 2, I would say, was close behind. Peloton 3 was also close behind. But in that front peloton on that sector, there was only Wiebes and Kopecky. And that's not enough to start chasing Ellen Van Dijk yet. So it takes a bit on those next few kilometers for those splits to come back together. And then we start seeing, was it Marta Laag and Vash coming to the front? Or did Visma Leasebike also help out a little?
Yeah, Visma start to pace a bit with Linda Riedman and Van Boersvoort. So yeah, it's like a kind of a teams don't really want to, they don't want to help SD Worx out, but you don't have that luxury where you can play that game. Maybe you do that in a stage of the Baloise Belgium tour. You say, no, SD Worx, this is your problem. There's one Paris-Roubaix every year. And so at the end of the day, Van Dijk's everybody's problem, and she's Ellen Van Dijk. You can't just let everybody else solve it.
I agree, but this was the first moment where I started getting triggered at the Visma Leasebike strategy. As in, it's partially because of the interview of Pauline Ferrand-Prévot before the race that you mentioned. She mentioned a rather naive, in my opinion, strategy of, okay, we should try and drop Lorena Wiebes and go for the sprint of Vos in the pre-race interview. And I was like, if you do that, you're most likely not going to win the race. And at this point in the race, it looks like exactly that strategy was ongoing. They were pacing, like you said, with Riedman, just controlling Van Dijk, and in doing so, kind of helping SD Worx in the process. And I didn't want to see that. And I feel like that strategy continued for quite a bit. But to move that to the side for a second, 67 kilometers to go, crash by Ferguson. Other stuff is happening as well, I'm pretty sure. Farfar Georgie at this point has a mechanical before an important sector, Auchy-les-Orchies, and she's basically in Narnia from this point. For the next 35 kilometers, she's in this massive fight to get back. We'll get to whether she get back or not, or we might not, depending on whether she becomes relevant in the race or not. But the next important phase of the race is Auchy-les-Orchies. I've been preaching this off the top of my house in Belgium for the last week. I've been shouting for everybody to hear. Auchy-les-Orchies is one of the most underrated sectors in Paris-Roubaix. Together with, in my opinion, Canfin-Pavel, but it's maybe because I suffered myself on that sector. Auchy-les-Orchies, every single year, we see a favorite attack on that sector. And we see the same today, but no, there was no crash at the start of this sector, but immediate attacks, right?
Yeah, it's such a hard sector that the favorites, first of all, you don't want to be caught behind a weaker rider who blocks you in or crashes or whatever. Yeah. You kind of want a free wheel to the front, so you may as well be at the front. And Vash has already softened up the race. Like Blanca Vash has already, and her and Lark have been pacing, especially Vash on the cobble sectors, all out, which suggests to me also that the SD workers like Lark and Vash, who they maybe would have wanted in the final, they're all already being used up. So yeah, Kopecky goes on Auchy-les-Orchies with Wiebes in the wheel.
Yes.
But hold on. There was a crash that precipitated that.
That was on Mozambique. I'm pretty sure. No?
Probably right. I think you're right.
I feel like here there were just people caught off guard. Oh, Luke says it's on that sector. Okay,
Yeah,
the crash was on this sector.
Yeah, so the group was together, and then one of the Visma riders cuts in on the dirt. So like the cobbles don't go all the way to the grass on a lot of these sectors. And when there's a turn, there's not cobbles all in the apex of the turn. It goes cobbles, and then the quickest line is then to go onto gravel, and then back onto the cobbles. The problem is, you come in at speed off tarmac, especially this is how Pithy crashed last year. So you come in on tarmac at high tarmac speed. You hit the corner, and then you're going onto the gravel at an angle to then get back onto the cobbles. You can crash two ways. You can lose your front wheel on the gravel. You can hit the lip of the cobbles and also crash. And the Visma rider crashes in the gravel right in front of Ferron Prevot, who goes down. And Voss is also held up a little bit. At the same time, Kopecky spanks it, and it almost looked like, at this point, race over. She's got Wiebes in the wheel and no one in sight. There's just Ellen van Dijk up the road, who probably won't be able to do much to two of the best riders in the world on the flat. At
this point, I was terrified. I was like, okay, guys, come on. We're watching the cycling race. You're not going to tell me that with 54 kilometers to go, we're going to see Wiebes and Kopecky right away, and that's race over, right? And then, we've spoken about resurrections already. In Easter's miracle once again, Marianne Vos, who was far behind, actually, on this sector, just starts hammering it, closing and closing and closing the gap, gets back to the wheel. In the process, Van Dijk gets caught as well by Kopecky and Wiebes. And to be honest, I was kind of surprised by the strength of the two riders that also catch up afterwards. Romy Kasper from Human Powered Health and Jelena Eric. I still don't know how to pronounce her name, to be honest.
Jelena Eric, the Movistar rider. She had a magic race today. And Voss here saves the whole race, and it could have changed the whole race, because if Kopecky's able to go with Wiebes, they'll just ride out all out together or chop off. But then when you got passengers, you can't do it like that. They did catch Van Dijk, because she's obviously not going to pull when it's those two with her, and so a big group, a moderate-sized lead group forms with very poor cooperation, and this is the problem with SD Worx, which you've got Kopecky, Wiebes, both first and second favourite. So even though Voss is there, maybe Voss is as good as Kopecky today on level.
Could
I mean, that gap was crazy. She closed. Maybe she's not going to pull.
But at this point in the race, let's say it after the next sector. We also got to mention, otherwise the North American continent will not be happy about us right here. Chloe Dygert and Alison Jackson also join up. So like you mentioned early on in the podcast, Alison Jackson making every single first group in these Paris-Roubaix after what seemed like a one-off in the way she won Paris-Roubaix Femmes before, but that's not the case clearly. Mons en Pavel coming up. So the next big sector, 5-star sector, not that far after Orchies. So 5K later, and Kopecky starts pushing at the end of the sector, and we start seeing riders drop. Romy Kasper drops, Ellen van Dijk drops, and after that sector is where it starts to get interesting. There's an uphill, which I think has been used in the past by multiple riders after Mons en Pavel, Van der Poel, like you mentioned in the men's race, to give a little bit of a wiggle in the attack, and Kopecky keeps pushing there. We see a first weakness in a couple of riders. Everyone but Voss basically drops off the back. At this point, you're not 100% sure whether Wiebes dropping is 100% a choice or the legs. But to me, at this point in the race, Kopecky looks like she has diamonds in the legs.
She does. Kopecky looks like SD Worx's best chance to win this race, and she always was their best chance to win this race. And that's why this whole race situation here becomes very, very strange. So here's Voss is with Kopecky. Pauline, there's then the group, like you mentioned, Wiebes behind with the second-tier favourites.
Yeah.
All the other SD workers gone from the race. When that crash happened, before when PFP was taken out, basically everyone behind that didn't make PFP's chase group is out because there was crosswinds in the tarmac afterwards, full-on echelon action. They're gone. And then, behind the group of now Wiebes is Trek chasing and FDJ chasing because Van Dijk's just got crashed. And so PFP, who looked like she'd been trying to bridge across, she has much more of a chance now to come back into the race. That means Voss will stop relaying because PFP is still in the race. We also have a long tarmac section of 18 Ks, as I said, before the Canfin and Pavel, Carrefour de Labre sections, which is where everyone's thinking anticipate. And at this point, it was very, very clear to me, SD Worx got to go all in on Kopecky. They showed, I saw, Weber's not a threat anymore.
Yeah.
She's cooked.
I agree. And we saw that especially on Sector 9, which we haven't really dived into yet too much. That's the last moment where Kopecky really attacks. And once again, Vos in the wheel. And that's where Wiebes has the real trouble, where Kopecky ends up... Wiebes was the only one in that group that dropped on Sector 9. So, sorry, but it's not a choice at that point. It's not a tactical... If you're the only one that drops in a group, you can't say that was a tactical choice to try and drop with someone else.
Yeah, let the wheel go so someone closes it.
You have to close it yourself. So that makes absolutely no sense. You said it. FDG Suez brings that back after a one-off attack by Elena Erich once again. And that's when we see a larger group where, as you mentioned, the strategies become interesting. Before we get to SD Worx, EF and Little Trek do the things that are good at this point in my personal opinion.
Hold on.
Oh?
Before that peloton comes back, they were at 20-25 seconds for a long time.
Yes.
Weber should have ridden all out for Kopecky.
Yes.
Because there's no SD workers in it. Weber's is cooked. Everyone's seen she's cooked. And now you have a group of 4 Treks, 3 Vismas, 3 EFs, 4 Canyons. You have to keep, and hope that Vos will relay with Kopecky or something. You have to keep ahead of that group. But Weber's never works for Kopecky.
Exactly. And we see that exact moment. Well, like I mentioned on Sector 9, when Kopecky attacked and Wiebes dropped, after that happens, when Kopecky waits on Wiebes, in the smaller group before they get caught, Kopecky goes to Wiebes, pats her on the back, like asking, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Whatever. I'm sorry, but at that point, that should not be the way it's working. At that point, it should be, like you said, Wiebes. And to be honest, I don't know what it's like in the team, but externally, Lorena Wiebes looks extremely selfish over the last 2 years in cycling. Like, Tour de France Femmes last year comes to mind immediately. She crashes her GC leader, which is Demi Voting, then looks back and says, oh, I saw a yellow thing on the floor. It's probably fine. And continues riding instead of waiting for Vollering, which might have actually won them the Tour de France Femmes. Most likely would have. So that's one massive red flag when it comes to selfishness. But also this year, after Gent-Wevelgem and I think Brugge de Panne, Wiebes was extremely vocal about, I need to give this back to Kopecky. I haven't seen her do a single thing this year for Kopecky. Not a single second at any point in cycling this year. And I've watched every kilometer of the Classic, so I'm sorry, but she just looks very selfish. She might not be that in person, I don't know, but she's fucking selfish on TV.
Babe, I mean, Sportster was going crazy, but it's kind of true. I mean, I heard, they were going crazy that Wiebes wasn't helping Kopecky, and you're right, like, Kopecky's the reason that Wiebes won Sanremo. Without Kopecky pulling back, Elisa Longo Borghini on the Via Roma, Elisa Longo Borghini wins that race by 5 seconds. And so it also becomes very clear that the only way for SD Worx to win is Kopecky in a small group or solo. Well, I'll tell you why.
Like last year.
And you might look at the results and be like, oh, but Wiebes, she could still sprint. No. You got no domestiques. So if your plan before the race was we're going to have Lach and Vash lock this down, and then on Carrefour de Labre, Canfin and Pavel, Kopecky will lock it down for Lorena. That's not how the race has happened anymore. No. The race is way too open, and Trek, EF, Canyon, not Visma yet, have shown an inclination that they want to get ahead of the race, and Kopecky is getting rolled.
Exactly. And we see that right in front of us with the likes of Letizia Borghesi, Italian rider for EF, doing really well this year, to be honest, so far. Next to that, after that, Alison Jackson on the other side of the road, smashing it. We see Little Trek doing the exact same thing, and that's when we first get a proper separation. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, Emma Norsgaard off the front, goes to 30 seconds, goes to 35 seconds. I was like, okay, this is a gap, a proper gap. And all those moments, like you mentioned, Kopecky's the one reacting to all these attacks and not Wiebes. And when I saw that, I was like, oy, that's not looking too vibrant there. Then we see a response from someone in the peloton. And I gotta say, up to this point, I think at this point even, when those rolling attacks were starting to happen, Visma Leasebike went back to the front in the group and started pacing a little bit. And that was my second strike. against the Visma Lease bike strategy. Because I was thinking, I'm sorry, but if your strategy is truly to literally ride from the bunch and try and get it to a Vos sprint, then you're never winning this race.
That's correct. And the problem with the numerical advantage is if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't anticipate, with EF, with Trek, and Sophie van Borsvoort, she had a very good race. She went with one move. Vos Kopecki's never going to let go. It has to be Ferrand-Prévot. She doesn't have the sprint, and she can ride solo threshold for 30 minutes, no problem. Technically good on the cobbles. If you don't use your numerical advantage and then Trek go, and you know Trek they are going to go. They're not going to rest. They're not going to wait for a sprint with Bosmo. So they're going to go. EF with Jackson and Borghese are going to go. Canyon Schramm should have been, if they could, with Consoni or Dygert. If you don't use it and then you miss it, Kopecky will just say, well, you have numbers. Use your domestique. And then they were for a time being until they're like, well, are we really going to close this whole race down for Lotte Kopecky and Lorena Wiebes maybe to win the sprint? And then we didn't see the exact moment it happened. I don't know how she slid off the front. It looked like just a little uphill kicker. Before the cobble sector... I don't know which one it was.
I've got the images in my head. I see Ferrand-Prévot making a move. I see no imminent response. There's like a gap on the peloton instantly. And Kopecky's responding to the second rider, if I recall, not to her. And the second rider doesn't actually manage to close Ferrand-Prévot, and therefore Kopecky was not able to react to Ferrand-Prévot herself. So it's like Kopecky controlled the counters. According to Luke, it was Dygert. You mentioned Bakstedt. Could have been either of the two.
So yeah, Canyon, when we saw that, it was either Dygert or Bakstedt. And then there was a Trek blocking, because remember, Trek still got Norsgaard ahead, Trek are blocking. I was like, this is the move. This is the move, because you got now two teammates, and you got Vos blocking, who's looking as good as Kopecky at this moment in the race. And if PFP, she's never going to beat Norsgaard in a sprint, but she's got 2, 4, and 5-star sectors coming up to drop her at the end of this race. And this then completely flips the script. She gets across, Canyon start controlling with Bakstedt, but Backstedt's not going to be... She's not going to be able to pull as fast as, obviously, PFP. And then PFP does, I think it was the Bourgel sector 6. She then keeps the gap and opens it to like 15 seconds because then there's no reaction from Kopecky on that cobble sector. I was like, Kopecky has to solve it on this sector. And she doesn't, or Wiebes has to take control for Kopecky right now. And then PFP gets across to Norsgaard. Norsgaard begins to relay. And I was like, this is big trouble for SD Worx behind.
I agree. And like, especially because you said it, on Siswana, Bourgel and Bourgel-Wanin, sector 7 and 6, didn't really see a massive Kopecky action there. Then I'm waiting, okay, Canfin, Pavel, Carrefour de l'Arbre, the last moment to do so. If Le Kopecky truly has diamonds in the legs, she can still manage to do something here. But the gap is starting to expand, like you already mentioned it. It's like it's going towards 55 seconds, 57 seconds a minute. So the time's going up. The more, hot take. The more time that a rider is ahead, the harder it is to close them by the time you reach the finish line. You didn't know that, right? That's like S-tier cycling knowledge. But we get to Canfin and Pavel. We look at the second group, and I'm like, okay, this is where Kopecky has to do it. She's not even at the front. She's behind Wiebes on this sector. Like, it's just not going to happen then, eh? And at this point, I'm starting to feel like, yes, I've been shitting on SD Worx's strategy a bit in this race. I don't agree with it, but I also don't believe Kopecky's legs would have been good enough in the first place based on this. Am I underrating her legs?
I think you're underrating Kopecky. I think if you watch the race she had to have, of course, Vos looks very sharp at the end of this race, and Vos was sharp, and I feel bad she didn't get the podium at the end, and she could have won in a different way, but Kopecky, when Vos got the armchair ride, Kopecky's closing, she was even closing Jelena Eric anticipations with 45Ks to go. It was not a good ride from Kopecky today. It didn't, I blame her for not banging her fist on the table. And also she's done Paris-Roubaix seems to be her kryptonite, even though she has won. But like in terms of some decision making,
remember the year that she was riding for Chantal van den Broek-Blaak and German rider, no, Luxembourg rider,
Majerus, yeah.
That made no sense.
Yeah, and today was similar. I was like, she's riding for a Vibus who cannot win. And she's like, I'm just going to ride for her to win a sprint, which that wasn't happening. So yeah, PFP, she has to drop Norsgaard. She does so on Canfin and Pavel. And like it just seemed like the tempo from her just cracked her. If she didn't drop her there was also Carrefour de l'Arbre where she would have dropped her.
But I have to say, gotta be loving the ride of Pauline Ferrand-Prévot so far. Smashing it this year when it comes to one-day races. When the year started, I was like, okay, I don't believe her Tour de France Femme aim or goal. I didn't see that. I saw an opportunity in one-day classics, maybe not at the level we're seeing so far, because at this point, she's potentially riding off to a Paris-Roubaix Femmes victory. But man, oh man, is it just me, or does she look like the most I don't want to ride aero rider I've ever seen in my life?
Yeah, she's in the big gear, like old school style big gear. Yeah, not tucked over like the other like Kopecky
it's like
is.
The anti-Healy.
Yeah, anti-Ben Healy. And yeah, she was just because it looks like it's almost imperceptible how fast she's going because of that low cadence, but she rips the gap open to Norsgaard because Norsgaard's in the middle. Trek don't then start chasing, and then the group behind's pretty much dysfunctional. Kopecki's pacing she's holding PFP at a minute. The gap's not really changing in either direction, and we see that PFP basically has this race wrapped up in no small part because Voss has been covering every move behind. So when EF jump, Voss is there. Shabby jumps a couple of times. Voss is on the wheel, disrupting. And yeah, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot comes back to the road this year, and she wasn't supposed to do this race at all. And in her 9th race day, she wins Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift with a very impressive solo, 58 seconds ahead of Letizia Borghese, who's had a great classic season. She attacked that group chasing behind with Alison Jackson in it. For the second, Wiebers just beat Voss. For third, in the sprint in the velodrome, Voss 4th, Jackson 5th. Confalonieri 6th on UnoX. Shabby 7th. She tried. Canyon Shram 8th with Dygert. I think perhaps they could hope for a little bit better. Balsamo 9th is the first little Trek rider on 121. Consoni on 121. Jelena Erich 11th. A great race from her. Kopecky finishes 12th on 204. Ooh. She's nearly caught by Pfeiffer Georgie, who crashed in Willem-Zahem.
Yep. I gotta say, amazing to see Letizia Borghese getting second. In 2021, she was known as the rider that next to what's the male Swiss rider that threw a beat on and got disqualified from the Tour of Flanders?
Mickey Scher.
Yeah. On the women's cycling side, that was Letizia Borghese in the women's RVV of 2021. I'm pretty sure when she rode for, I don't know, she had like a bluish green kit, I think, for an Italian Conti team, and she got disqualified as well for throwing a beat on. And that's how I knew her for the last 3 years, next to the fact that I'm pretty sure she won a Giro Don stage by now. But that being said, she's flying right now. To see her getting second in Roubaix, yes, it's with a late anticipation, but to be in that group in the first place, you got to be really damn good. So I don't think this is the last thing we're going to hear of her. And it's like she really made a step up to being a proper level classics rider this year. And I'm curious what that's going to go to next year and even for the rest of this year, to be honest. But we got to talk about Pauline Ferrand-Prévot a little bit. Like, what do we see as a potential ceiling for her for the rest of her road career? Because she signed for 3 years, right? At Visma Lease Bike on her return to road cycling. Years. She mentioned the Tour de France Femmes as a big thing. I've already said my case of what I believed at the start of the year. Do the classics and her performances in that change our point of view towards that? As in, for me, not yet. I need to see it more in stage racing first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's two things. You can't ignore what happened on Jebel Hafid, which was the only uphill finish she's done.
Yep.
But on the other hand, I think she's way outperforming expectations immediately in the big monument level one-day races. So clearly she because you don't know how. Okay, yes, she was very, very dominant Olympic gold medalist in mountain bike, but she's been away from the road for the best part of a decade. You don't exactly know how that's going to translate compared to the Kopeckis, Elisa Longoborghinis, Vollerings of the world in terms of a general level sense. And that general level is up there with the top 5-10 riders in the world.
Does that help that she's been gone so long to the point that when she does make a move, like in this race, that Kopecki's not in the wheel? That Kopecki's following a Canyon SRAM rider instead? Does it help in her not... She was second in the Tour of Flanders last week.
Well, that's
Is she underrated?
That's why I feel bad for Vos not getting the podium, because Vos would never get that freedom. Yeah. If Vos jumps there, I mean, it's also you get what you reap what you sow, and maybe if she does jump there and Kopecki's tire, she doesn't close it. I don't know, but I think there is a little bit of an aspect like when she gets to Norsgaard Benji.
Yeah.
If Vos is there, Norsgaard, she won't relay. She won't relay. But with PFP, it's a bit of a more of an unknown quantity, and I was like, I knew she will drop her on the hard cobble sectors, like 100%. So,
yeah, it's if you look at the race, it's almost as if the initial strategy I didn't like about Visma Lease bike until they switched to attacking with Ferrand-Prévot towards that front of the race. It's almost as if SD Worx did the exact opposite, right? Because they went from attacking to playing really passive for Wiebes.
I didn't understand. I don't know why Wiebes was so protected today by Kopecky in the car. I don't understand it. Kopecki's the world champion for a reason. The race opened up with 75 k's to go, and from then on, with the cross tailwind between sections, with Van Dijk gone, with crashes, with splits, it was never going to be a group sprint. Even if, say, they get to the miracle scenario they were looking for, which is after Willem-Zahem, a group of 8, Kopecky and Wiebes, it wouldn't have been a sprint.
Yeah, true.
It wouldn't have been one. Like in San Remo, there's only like literally 2 minutes where you got to close the race down after the descent. It's not a long period of time. Here, there's 10 minutes where EF are going to roll you, Canyon are going to roll you, Visma are going to roll you. It's never going to be a sprint. So very strange, I would say. But
because on paper, Visma, even with Wiebes there, will always roll attack because Wiebes is on paper the fastest sprinter. So
Wiebes was cooked and she still beat Vos in the sprint.
It's very different from RVV, where a lot of riders overestimate their sprint and are willing to sprint against Kopecky. With Wiebes, you should be able to know by now that she's on paper going to cook you. Even though the sprint for third was pretty close. I thought Vos had it on eye test, so my eye test was wrong there because Wiebes getting that third spot. It's a shame that Vos is not on the podium. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, was it a great edition of Paris-Roubaix Femmes? Because I didn't feel like it was the best edition I've ever seen. Wasn't a terrible edition either, but it's not the most memorable one either.
Yeah,
but I think Ferrand-Prévot winning is a very good thing for the sport of cycling.
Definitely yeah, it could have been like maybe it was a 7 out of 10. I think it was very entertaining. Maybe you need a little bit more spice where you have like on Carrefour de l'Arbre, a group of 3 counterattackers go across, and are they going to catch her?
Or Norsgaard and Ferrand-Prévot enter the velodrome together, so it's not like the last 10K or like known who the winner is, you know?
But as you said, Benji, commercially for the sport and for Visma, it's very good. Ferrand-Prévot winning, she's very, very famous in France and internationally. She's got Emmanuel Macron, whether you like him or not, he's tweeting the last kilometer footage of the race. That's good for the race overall. So again, these monument level races with the brand name recognition, like Paris-Roubaix, like Tour de France Femmes, coming to the women's side, I think it's good for everybody. It's good for the riders. It's definitely good for the teams, and it's good for the organizers too. I think the organizers have to be pretty happy with how it's going. ASO, I would say, with the French winner.
Yeah, I think so as well. And like, I would have liked to see what a Ferguson would have done if she hadn't crashed. I hope her crash wasn't too serious because it didn't look that great the moment it happened. What other riders? Longoborghini, obviously, missed her because of the crash she had in early Tour of Flanders. But at the end of the day, do we learn anything from this towards the Hill Classics? Because there's a few riders here that are riding them, right? I'm guessing Kopecky?
Kopecky, Ferrand-Prévot, Vos, Elise Shabby, of course. I don't know if Dygert will do Amstel. Elena Erich in good shape, but it's tricky because this race really is it really is a specialist race. So, it doesn't apply to the other races so well. Blanca Vash looks in good shape, so I think she'll be good there. I think it means that if Voss is in good shape at Amstel and Ferrand-Prévot does it, that actually with the 160k route, not 100k route this year, like last year, I think they're going to use that dual threat again, Benji, and actually not many other teams have the dual threat of that level, especially if Wiebe starts struggling.
Yeah, but then Van der Breggen is there.
True. That's a big difference, yeah.
Any other teams where the strength also increased there? Because Pieterse also wasn't at the start here.
Yeah,
You'd expect her to be back for Amstel. I don't know. Voting exists in Hill Classics.
Yeah.
Should be good.
I'm really looking forward to the Hill Classics.
Yeah.
And that was Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift. In terms of Basque Country, it just finished. I got to say, I didn't watch much of the final Eibar stage, but it was chaotic. But Joao Almeida won that stage after winning a very impressive solo the other day.
Spoilers, I hadn't watched it yet.
Oh, well, there you go.
I can't believe it. I saw 5 riders reach the top of the Itzua climb, and now I know the winner.
Luke says we recap it in the weekly. All right, Luke has spoken. In that case, I'll let you all go. But hope you enjoyed Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift. Got the men's recap tomorrow. What do we learn for tomorrow, Benji?
Ooh.
How we looking? How's the course playing?
How's the weather looking? Is what I'm wondering mostly.
We got baited. It ain't no rain. I think we got baited. And a rain.
I've looked outside here, and I'm not too far from Roubaix, to be honest. And I'm looking out my window into the area that is Roubaix, and I'm seeing beautiful blue skies, my friend. The rain has disappeared. Where are these predictions going, my friend?
So
the showers.
Luke can take his American, European, Alaskan, Greenlandic, Antarctic model for the weather, and I'm taking Benji's eye test out the window.
My eye test says that it's going to be dusty and dry tomorrow. Luke says that it's going to be rain showers, maybe between 1 and 2. So, everyone watching, we're going to judge whether my weather eye test or Luke's everywhere model is the most accurate here.
Okay. We'll see. I'm siding with Benji at the moment. Hope you enjoyed the recap, and we'll see you this time tomorrow afternoon. Until then, ciao, ciao.